Chapter 4, The Network. The secondary base was located in the Orphan System, a collection of rogue planets that had been ejected from their original star system millions of years ago. Drifting in the void between galaxies, they were invisible to Imperial sensors and accessible only to those who knew their exact coordinates. It was here that the true scale of the rebellion became apparent. Zara stood in the observation deck of Haven, a converted colony ship that had become the rebellion's mobile headquarters, watching as vessels from across the galaxy emerged from hyperspace. Klingon battle cruisers flew alongside Vulcan science ships, their crews united by shared hatred of Imperial oppression. Former Imperial warships bearing the scars of hasty modifications worked in formation with alien designs that incorporated technologies the Empire had deemed too dangerous for widespread use. Status report, she requested as Admiral Vasquez joined her at the observation windows. 437 vessels now confirmed as part of the Free Fleet, Vasquez replied, consulting her datapad. Representatives from over 300 worlds, including some we thought had been completely pacified. The numbers were staggering. In the 6 weeks since the evacuation of Kepler 438c, the rebellion had grown from a small collection of deserters to a genuine military force. More importantly, they had established communication networks that spanned 3 galaxies, allowing for coordination on a scale that the Empire was only beginning to comprehend. What about Hassan's exotic matter plan? Zara asked. That's complicated, Vasquez admitted. He's been working with some of our more technically minded species, and they think they've found a solution. But you're not going to like it. They made their way through Haven's converted corridors to what had once been the colony ship's agricultural section. Now it housed the rebellion's Research and Development Division, a chaotic collection of laboratories where scientists from dozens of species worked on projects that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. Dr. Hassan stood at the center of it all, his graying hair even more disheveled than usual as he gestured excitedly at a holographic display showing molecular structures that seemed to twist through dimensions Zara couldn't quite perceive. "Ah, Commander," he called out as she approached. "Perfect timing. We've just had a breakthrough that will change everything." "Explain," Zara said, noting the excitement in the faces of the assembled scientists. Whatever they had discovered, it had them genuinely energized. The Empire controls exotic matter production by maintaining a monopoly on the Zentari mining techniques, Hassan began, referring to the crystalline species that had first discovered how to extract the particles from hyperspace itself. But my colleagues here have found something even better. He gestured to a tall, ethereal being whose translucent skin revealed intricate patterns of light flowing beneath its surface. Zara recognized the species, the Luminari, whose homeworld had been one of the first to fall to Imperial integration. "Tell her," Hassan prompted. The Luminari's voice was like music, each word accompanied by subtle shifts in the patterns of light visible through its skin. "We have discovered that exotic matter can be cultivated, not merely extracted. Using certain resonance frequencies, we can encourage naturally occurring particles to replicate themselves." Zara felt her pulse quicken. "How much exotic matter could you produce?" "With proper facilities, enough to supply the entire Free Fleet," the Luminari replied. "But there is a complication. The cultivation process requires a specific type of stellar radiation that can only be found in systems with Class O hypergiants. And the Empire controls all known Class O systems," Zara finished, the implications becoming clear. "So we'd have to take one from them." "Not take," Hassan corrected with a grin. "Liberate. And I know exactly which system would be perfect." The holographic display shifted to show a star map focused on the Terminus sector, where a brilliant blue hypergiant designated as Wolf 359 Alpha dominated the surrounding space. 3 planets orbited the massive star, their surfaces scorched by radiation that would be lethal to most forms of life. "The vegan system," Hassan continued. "Home to the Empire's primary weapons testing facility and a small garrison fleet. But more importantly, it's where they've been conducting experiments on using stellar radiation to enhance exotic matter properties." Zara studied the tactical data, noting the system's defenses and strategic value. It was well defended but not impossibly so, especially if they could coordinate multiple strike forces to divide the Imperial attention. "What kind of time frame are we looking at?" she asked. "If we can secure the system and establish the cultivation facilities, we could have unlimited exotic matter within 6 months," the Luminari answered. "Enough to build not just the interdiction network, but an entirely new generation of faster-than-light drives." The promise was intoxicating: energy independence from the Empire, the ability to move freely between systems without relying on Imperial-controlled refueling stations. But Zara had learned to be suspicious of solutions that seemed too good to be true. "What's the catch?" she asked. Hassan's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "The cultivation process produces a specific type of radiation as a byproduct. Harmless to most species, but it has interesting effects on Imperial cybernetic implants." Zara thought of Chairman Kronos and the other heavily augmented council members. "What kind of effects?" "Complete systems failure," Hassan said simply. "Any Imperial personnel with cybernetic enhancements would be incapacitated within minutes of exposure to the cultivation radiation." The ethical implications hit Zara like a physical blow. Many Imperial citizens had cybernetic implants, medical devices that kept them alive, neural interfaces that allowed them to function in modern society. The cultivation process would essentially create a weapon that could kill millions of innocent people. "We can't use this," she said firmly. "I won't be responsible for genocide, even if it wins us the war." "But Commander," one of the other scientists protested, "we could warn people, give them time to remove non-essential implants." "And alert the Empire to our plans in the process," Zara cut him off. "No. We find another way." The research bay fell silent as her words sank in. Around them, the best scientific minds in the galaxy had just offered her a weapon that could cripple the Empire overnight, and she had rejected it based on moral grounds that many would consider naive. It was Admiral Vasquez who broke the silence. "What if we could use it selectively? Target only military installations and Imperial leadership, avoid civilian populations?" "The radiation doesn't discriminate," Hassan replied. "It affects all cybernetic systems equally, regardless of their purpose or the intentions of their users." Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Every day the rebellion delayed gave the Empire time to consolidate its control, to integrate more worlds into their resource extraction network. How many lives could they save by ending the war quickly, even if it meant compromising their principles? "There has to be another way," she said finally. "Keep working on the exotic matter cultivation, but also research ways to shield civilian implants from the radiation effects. We win this war by being better than the Empire, not by becoming them." As she left the research bay, Zara could feel the disappointed eyes of the scientists following her. They saw her decision as weakness, a failure to seize an opportunity that might not come again. But she knew that the moment the rebellion abandoned its moral foundation was the moment it stopped being worth fighting for. The communications center was buzzing with activity when she arrived, dozens of operators managing the complex network that kept the scattered rebellion connected across interstellar distances. Captain Kothak stood at the central console, his multiple arms allowing him to monitor several conversations simultaneously. "Status report," Zara requested. "Mixed news," Kothak replied. "The good news is that we've established contact with resistance cells in all 3 Imperial core sectors. The underground is spreading faster than the Empire can contain it." "And the bad news? The Empire has begun implementing new security measures. Loyalty testing for all military personnel, mandatory cybernetic monitoring for civilian populations, and something they're calling Project Unity." The last item made Zara's blood run cold. She had heard rumors of Project Unity during her time as an Imperial officer, whispers of a secret program designed to ensure absolute loyalty to the Empire. Most officers had dismissed it as paranoid speculation, but the Empire's recent behavior suggested otherwise. "What do we know about Project Unity?" she asked. Kothak's expression grew grim. "Not much, but what we do know is terrifying. Mass cybernetic implantation, forced neural conditioning, the complete elimination of individual identity in favor of collective Imperial consciousness. They're turning their own people into machines, Vasquez breathed, having joined them during the briefing. Not machines, Kafak corrected. Slaves. Willing, enthusiastic slaves who believe that serving the Empire is the highest form of existence. Zara stared at the communication displays, watching as reports flowed in from across the galaxy. The Empire was preparing for a final push, one that would eliminate not just the rebellion but the very concept of individual freedom. If they succeeded, the galaxy would become a uniform, sterile collection of worlds populated by beings who had forgotten what it meant to choose their own destiny. How long before they can implement this on a galactic scale, she asked. Our intelligence suggests 6 to 8 months, Kafak replied. They're starting with the core worlds and working outward. Once they achieve critical mass, resistance will become literally impossible. The Empire's subjects will be psychologically incapable of rebelling. The timeline changed everything. 6 months wasn't enough time to build the interdiction network through conventional means, wasn't enough time to slowly chip away at Imperial supply lines and gradually weaken their hold on conquered worlds. If the rebellion was going to succeed, it needed a decisive victory, something that would shatter Imperial morale and inspire massive defections before Project Unity could be implemented. Assemble the fleet commanders, Zara ordered. We're going to Nova Centralis. The War Council convened in Haven's main conference room, a space that had once been designed for colonial administrative meetings but now hosted the most dangerous gathering in galactic history. Around the circular table sat the leaders of the rebellion, former Imperial officers, alien military commanders, and civilian leaders who had watched their worlds burn under Imperial rule. Admiral Vasquez activated the central holographic display, showing the Nova Centralis system in all its fortified glory. The capital of the Galactic Empire was protected by 3 rings of defensive platforms, each capable of destroying entire fleets. The home fleet, over 200 of the Empire's most advanced warships, patrolled the inner system, while the planets themselves were shielded by energy barriers that could deflect planet-killer weapons. It's the most heavily defended system in known space, stated Commander Kretak, a reptilian Saurian whose homeworld had been strip-mined for its dilithium deposits. My tactical analysis suggests we would need a fleet of at least 1,000 ships to have any chance of success. We have 437, Admiral Chen pointed out. She was one of the few human commanders who had defected after witnessing the Empire's treatment of conquered alien populations. Even with the element of surprise, we'd be outnumbered 5 to 1. Which is why we don't fight the entire home fleet, Dr. Hassan interjected, stepping forward to manipulate the holographic display. We've been thinking about this all wrong. We don't need to conquer Nova Centralis, we need to liberate it. The display zoomed in on Nova Centralis itself, showing the sprawling urban centers that housed the Empire's government and military leadership. Beneath the gleaming spires and administrative complexes, Hassan highlighted a network of underground facilities that most of the commanders hadn't known existed. The Undercity, Hassan explained. 50 million people living in conditions that would make a Cardassian labor camp look luxurious. They're the descendants of the original Nova Centralis colonists, displaced when the Empire claimed the planet as its capital. For 300 years, they've been forgotten, ignored, treated as an inconvenient reminder of the planet's pre-imperial history. You want to start a revolution on the Empire's capital world, Vasquez said, her voice mixing admiration with disbelief. It's brilliant. And completely insane. The Undercity residents have been living under Imperial oppression longer than anyone, Hassan continued. They have detailed knowledge of the planet's infrastructure, access to systems that even Imperial security doesn't know about, and every reason to want the Empire destroyed. Commander Thex, an Andorian whose ice-blue skin bore the ritual scars of his people's warrior tradition, leaned forward with interest. What kind of support could they provide? According to our intelligence, they've been preparing for this opportunity for decades, Hassan replied. Hidden weapons caches, sabotage teams already in place within Imperial facilities, communication networks that bypass all official channels. All they need is a signal to begin. Zara studied the tactical implications, her mind racing through the possibilities. A coordinated uprising on Nova Centralis could cripple the Empire's command structure, but only if the Free Fleet could provide enough distraction to prevent the Imperial forces from crushing the rebellion before it gained momentum. "What about the exotic matter facilities?" she asked. "If we're going to Nova Centralis anyway, we might as well accomplish both objectives." "The primary refinery is located on Nova Centralis itself," Hassan confirmed, highlighting a massive industrial complex on the planet's northern continent. "The secondary facilities are on the inner planets, all within the range of our projected operation zone." Captain Kafak manipulated his portion of the display, showing fleet movement patterns and deployment schedules. "I've been analyzing Imperial patrol rotations. There's a 6-hour window every 72 hours when the home fleet conducts maintenance operations. During that time, their combat effectiveness is reduced by approximately 30%. Still leaves us facing overwhelming odds," Commander Kretak pointed out. "Not if we use the new technologies our research teams have been developing," Admiral Vasquez said, activating another section of the display. "The Luminari exotic matter cultivation isn't the only breakthrough we've achieved." The display showed technical specifications for devices that looked like nothing Zara had ever seen, weapons that seemed to bend space around themselves, defensive systems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and most remarkably, what appeared to be a new type of faster-than-light drive. "The Freedom Drive," Dr. Hassan explained proudly. "It doesn't rely on exotic matter manipulation like traditional hyperspace engines. Instead, it creates localized spacetime distortions that allow for instantaneous travel across interstellar distances." "Instantaneous?" Zara asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Within a 50 light-year radius, yes. Beyond that, the power requirements become prohibitive. But within that range, our ships could appear anywhere without warning, bypass all conventional defenses, and disappear before the enemy could respond." The tactical possibilities were staggering. With the Freedom Drive, the Free Fleet could strike at any target within the Nova Centralis system without having to fight their way through the defensive perimeters. They could appear directly above the exotic matter facilities, destroy them, and vanish before the home fleet could intercept. "How many ships can we equip with these drives?" Zara asked. 57 of our fastest vessels," Kafak replied. "The larger ships don't have the power generation capacity to support the drives, but our cruisers and destroyers can be retrofitted within 2 weeks." Zara felt the pieces of the plan falling into place in her mind. A small, highly mobile strike force using the Freedom Drives to hit multiple targets simultaneously, while the main fleet provided distraction and support for the Undercity uprising. It was audacious, dangerous, and probably suicidal, but it might actually work. "There's one more thing," Hassan said quietly. "The Freedom Drive technology produces the same type of radiation as the exotic matter cultivation process. Any Imperial personnel with cybernetic implants who are exposed to our ships will be affected." The moral dilemma she had thought she'd resolved came rushing back. The Freedom Drive was their best hope of victory, but using it would inevitably harm innocent Imperial citizens who happen to have medical implants or neural interfaces. "How extensive is the radiation effect?" she asked. "Limited to a radius of approximately 1 kilometer around each equipped ship," the Luminari scientist replied, its light patterns shifting to indicate uncertainty. "Duration of exposure determines severity of effects. Brief encounters might cause temporary system malfunctions, while prolonged exposure could result in permanent damage." Zara closed her eyes, weighing the moral cost against the potential salvation of billions of beings throughout the galaxy. Every choice in this war seemed to require sacrificing some principle, some aspect of the values she was fighting to preserve. "We proceed with the Nova Centralis operation," she said finally. "But we take every precaution to minimize civilian casualties. Our targets are military and industrial installations only. Any commander who unnecessarily exposes civilian populations to the radiation effects will answer to me personally." The assembled commanders nodded their understanding, each one recognizing the terrible burden that command placed on their leader. They were asking her to become the very thing she opposed, someone who made calculated decisions about acceptable losses, who weighed the lives of innocents against strategic objectives. But sometimes, she was learning, leadership meant accepting damnation in order to preserve hope for others. "When do we begin?" Admiral Vasquez asked. "Immediately. Signal all fleet elements to rendezvous at staging area Gamma. We launch the attack in 72 hours. As the commanders dispersed to prepare their forces, Zara remained alone in the conference room, staring at the holographic display of Nova Centralis. Somewhere on that gleaming world, Chairman Kronos and the Galactic Council were making their own preparations, implementing the final phases of Project Unity that would enslave the galaxy's mind as well as its body. In 72 hours, one of them would be proven right about the nature of civilization, about whether freedom or order represented the natural state of intelligent beings. Zara only hoped that if the rebellion failed, history would remember them as more than well-intentioned terrorists who had chosen the wrong side in humanity's final war. But first, they had to survive long enough to make history at all. Chapter 5, The Storm. The Freedom Drive lived up to its promise in ways that exceeded even Dr. Hassan's optimistic projections. As Zara watched from the bridge of her flagship, now rechristened Liberation, 57 ships simply vanished from normal space, their exotic radiation signatures disappearing from sensors as if they had never existed at all. The sensation of Freedom Drive travel was unlike anything she had experienced, not the familiar stretching of hyperspace or the gentle acceleration of conventional drives, but a moment of absolute discontinuity where the universe simply rearranged itself around them. One instant they were drifting in the void between galaxies, the next they hung in space above Nova Centralis, the gleaming capital world of the Galactic Empire spread out below them like a jeweled web. "All strike teams, report status," she commanded, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Strike Team Alpha in position above the primary exotic matter refinery," reported Commander Chen, her modified heavy cruiser Defiance invisible to Imperial sensors thanks to the revolutionary stealth systems the rebellion's scientists had developed. "Beginning attack run. Strike Team Beta engaging secondary facility on Nova Centralis 3, added Captain Kothak from his converted destroyer Swift Vengeance. Imperial defenders are responding, but they seem confused by our approach vector." Zara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Freedom Drive had delivered them past all of the Empire's defensive perimeters, placing them directly above their targets before the home fleet could react. But the easy part was over. Now came the challenge of destroying heavily fortified installations while avoiding the massive Imperial response that was undoubtedly mobilizing. "Strike Team Gamma, what's your status on the orbital platforms?" she asked. "This is Admiral Vasquez," came the reply from the Arcturus Dawn. "Platforms 7 through 12 are already showing signs of internal sabotage. The Undercity resistance is better organized than we hoped." Through the tactical display, Zara watched as explosions began blooming across Nova Centralis' surface. The forgotten residents of the Undercity had indeed been preparing for this moment, and their knowledge of Imperial infrastructure was proving invaluable. Power grids failed, communication networks went dark, and transportation systems ground to a halt as 3 centuries of suppressed rage finally found its outlet. "Commander Voss." The urgent voice of her sensor operator cut through the battle chatter. "Imperial Home Fleet is mobilizing. 67 vessels breaking from defensive positions, estimated intercept in 12 minutes. Signal the main fleet," Zara ordered. "Execute Prometheus Protocol." Light years away, the bulk of the Free Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Nova Centralis system, their combined firepower dwarfed by the Imperial defenders but their mere presence forcing the Empire to divide its attention. Led by the captured dreadnought Hegemony, now rechristened People's Will, nearly 400 rebel ships began their charge toward the inner system. The Imperial response was swift and coordinated, exactly what Zara had expected from Admiral Thorne and the Home Fleet command structure. Defense platforms swiveled to engage the incoming rebel force while patrol squadrons moved to establish interlocking fields of fire. It was a textbook defensive deployment that would have been nearly impossible to breach under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. "Strike Team Delta, commence diversionary attack on Government District," Zara commanded, watching as another group of Freedom Drive-equipped ships materialized above Nova Centralis's administrative center. Remember, target infrastructure, not personnel. The psychological impact of the simultaneous attacks was immediate and devastating. For the first time in the Empire's 300-year history, the capital world was under direct assault, its supposedly impregnable defenses bypassed by an enemy that could appear anywhere without warning. Across the planet's communication networks, panic spread as citizens who had never imagined war coming to their world suddenly found themselves in the middle of the galaxy's largest battle. Status report from the exotic matter facilities, Zara requested, noting the growing Imperial response on her tactical display. Primary refinery is 40% destroyed, reported Commander Chen. But they've activated some kind of automated defense system. It's like the facility is fighting back on its own. Secondary facility showing similar defensive responses, added Captain Kafak. These installations have been equipped with artificial intelligence systems that were not in the original intelligence reports. Dr. Hassan's voice crackled over the communication system from his position aboard the research vessel Innovation. Commander, we're detecting massive energy surges from both facilities. I think they're attempting to initiate an emergency exotic matter release. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. An uncontrolled exotic matter release could tear holes in space-time itself, creating gravitational anomalies that would make the entire Nova Centralis system uninhabitable. The Empire was willing to destroy their own capital rather than let it fall into rebel hands. All strike teams, abort current attack plans, she commanded. Priority 1, prevent exotic matter containment failure. Repeat, prevent containment failure at all costs. The battle's character shifted immediately from destruction to desperate damage control. Rebel ships that had been systematically dismantling Imperial installations now found themselves racing against time to prevent a catastrophe that would kill billions of innocent beings. Commander Chen's defiance dove toward the primary refinery, its weapons now focused on destroying the automated systems that were attempting to breach the containment fields. I need technical support, she transmitted. These AI defenses are adapting faster than I can counter them. Innovation moving to assist, Dr. Hassan replied, his research vessel's experimental systems already analyzing the exotic matter containment protocols. I'm detecting what appears to be a cascade failure in the containment matrix. If it reaches critical threshold. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the stakes. Meanwhile, the main Free Fleet had engaged the outer defensive perimeters, their desperate charge meeting the full fury of the Imperial home fleet. The Peoples will lead the assault, its massive guns trading salvos with orbital defense platforms while smaller rebel ships darted between the battle lines like schools of fish avoiding predators. Commander, Admiral Vasquez's voice was tense with strain. We're taking heavy casualties. The Imperial defenders are better organized than our intelligence suggested. I don't think we can maintain this assault much longer. Zara watched the tactical display with growing desperation. The main fleet was being systematically destroyed, the strike teams were struggling to prevent a system-wide catastrophe, and the Imperial forces were beginning to coordinate their response to the Freedom Drive attacks. Worse, long-range sensors were detecting additional Imperial fleets jumping into the system, reinforcements that would tip the balance irrevocably in the Empire's favor. It was Captain Kafak who provided the solution, his multiple-armed physiology allowing him to monitor systems that would have overwhelmed the human operator. Commander, I'm detecting massive power fluctuations in the government district. The Undercity Resistance has gained access to the Planetary Defense Control Center. What are they doing? Zara asked. Unknown, but energy readings suggest they're attempting to override something significant. Wait, I'm receiving a transmission from the surface. The main screen shimmered, revealing the face of a woman Zara didn't recognize, middle-aged, scarred, with the kind of hard eyes that came from a lifetime of oppression. Behind her, the rebel fighters of the Undercity worked frantically at control consoles that looked like they belonged in an Imperial military installation. Free Fleet, this is Resistance leader Maria Santos, the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of suppressed anger. We've gained control of the planetary shield generators. We can drop the defensive barriers around the exotic matter facilities, but only for 60 seconds before Imperial forces regain control. 60 seconds. It wasn't much time, but it might be enough. All strike teams, prepare for coordinated assault, Zara commanded. When the shields drop, we have 1 minute to complete our mission. Make it count. The next 60 seconds stretched like hours as every rebel ship in the Nova Centralis system prepared for the most crucial minute in galactic history. On the surface, the Undercity resistance fought desperate battles in the corridors of power, holding their positions against Imperial security forces long enough to execute their sabotage. Shields dropping, now! Santos transmitted. The exotic matter facilities, suddenly stripped of their protective barriers, lay vulnerable to direct attack. But instead of destruction, the rebel ships unleashed carefully targeted strikes designed to safely disperse the contained exotic matter, preventing both the catastrophic release and the Empire's ability to use the facilities for future production. Commander Chen's Defiance led the assault on the primary refinery, her weapons precisely calibrated to disrupt the containment fields without causing cascade failures. Containment systems neutralized, she reported. Exotic matter is dispersing safely into space. Secondary facility secured, added Captain Kafak. The AI defenses have been shut down, and the emergency release protocols have been cancelled. But their victory came at a terrible cost. Imperial reinforcements had arrived in overwhelming numbers, and the main Free Fleet was being systematically destroyed despite their desperate courage. The People's will listed heavily, her hull breached in a dozen places, while dozens of smaller rebel ships had already been reduced to debris. Commander, Admiral Vasquez's voice was weak, transmitted from the bridge of her crippled flagship. We've accomplished the mission, but we're not going to make it out. The Imperial fleet has us surrounded. Zara stared at the tactical display, watching as the rebellion's hopes seemed to die in the space around Nova Centralis. They had struck a significant blow against the Empire, but the cost was proving to be the entire Free Fleet. Then Dr. Hassan's excited voice cut through the despair. Commander, the exotic matter we released, it's not just dispersing randomly. The Freedom Drive resonance is creating a coherent field effect throughout the system. Meaning what? Zara demanded. Meaning every ship in the system now has access to Freedom Drive technology. The exotic matter has created a temporary field that extends our instantaneous travel capabilities to any vessel within the system's boundaries. The implications were staggering. Not only could the Free Fleet escape, but they could take Imperial ships with them, or leave them stranded depending on how the field was manipulated. Can we control it? Zara asked. The field responds to the same resonance frequencies as our Freedom Drives, Hassan confirmed. We can create selective transportation fields, choosing which ships are affected and which are left behind. For the first time since the battle began, Zara allowed herself to smile. Signal all Free Fleet vessels. Prepare for immediate evacuation. And signal the Imperial fleet, Admiral Thorne in particular. The face that appeared on her screen was exactly as she remembered, stern, uncompromising, bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns fought in the Empire's name. Admiral Marcus Thorne had been her mentor once, the officer who had taught her the meaning of duty and honor. Now he commanded the forces trying to destroy everything she believed in. Zara, he said simply, his voice carrying a mixture of disappointment and grudging respect. I should have known you were behind this madness. Hello, Marcus, she replied. I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. The exotic matter field we've created gives us control over faster-than-light travel throughout this system. We can take your entire fleet with us when we leave, or we can strand you here while we escape. Your choice. Thorne's expression didn't change, but she could see the calculations running behind his eyes. What do you want? Safe passage for our evacuation fleet. No pursuit, no attempts to track our departure vectors. In exchange, we leave your ships intact and return control of the field to you once we're clear of the system. And if I refuse? Then you explain to Chairman Kronos how you lost the entire home fleet along with the exotic matter facilities. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of old friendship and new loyalties. Finally, Thorn nodded slowly. "You have 15 minutes, Zara. After that, all agreements are void." "Understood. It's been an honor serving with you, Marcus. Even on opposite sides." "The honor was mine, Commander. I hope you find what you're looking for." The transmission ended, leaving Zara with the bittersweet taste of victory. They had accomplished their objectives, the exotic matter facilities were destroyed, the Undercity resistance had struck a powerful blow against Imperial authority, and the Free Fleet had demonstrated that nowhere in the galaxy was beyond their reach. But as she watched the rebel ships disappear one by one into the exotic matter field, Zara knew that the real war was just beginning. Project Unity was still moving forward, the Empire's grip on conquered worlds remained strong, and the Rebellion had revealed capabilities that would make them targets of the Empire's full fury. The Battle of Nova Centralis was over. The fight for the galaxy's soul had just begun. Epilogue: The New Dawn. 6 months after the Battle of Nova Centralis, Zara stood on the observation deck of the rebel stronghold known as Haven's End, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on the galaxy's first Freedom Drive manufacturing facility. Built into the heart of a rogue asteroid, the facility was invisible to Imperial sensors and capable of producing enough exotic matter to equip 1,000 ships. The rebellion had changed in those 6 months, evolving from a desperate collection of freedom fighters into something approaching a legitimate government in exile. Representatives from over 800 worlds now participated in what they called the Democratic Assembly, a governing body that made decisions through debate and consensus rather than imperial decree. "Status report," she requested as Admiral Vasquez joined her at the viewing port. "The interdiction network is 60% complete," Vasquez replied, consulting her ever-present datapad. 12 systems are now completely isolated from Imperial control, and another 30 are under partial blockade. The Empire's expansion has ground to a halt. And Project Unity? Stalled. The chaos we created on Nova Centralis set their timetable back by at least a year, and the Undercity uprising inspired similar rebellions on 17 other core worlds. The Empire is too busy fighting fires to implement galaxy-wide mind control. Zara nodded, feeling a cautious optimism that she hadn't allowed herself in years. The rebellion was winning, not through the massive battles she had once imagined, but through the slow, patient work of building something better than what they sought to replace. "There's something else," Vasquez continued, her tone growing serious. "We've received a transmission from Admiral Thorn. He wants to meet." The message was brief and encrypted, transmitted through channels that suggested it came from someone operating outside official Imperial authority. Thorn wanted to discuss terms, not surrender, but something he called mutual coexistence. They met on a neutral station in the border regions, where former Imperial territory gave way to the growing sphere of rebel control. Thorn arrived with minimal escort, his flagship bearing the scars of battles fought against his former protégé's forces. "You look tired, Marcus," Zara observed as they sat across from each other in the station's diplomatic suite. "The Empire is changing," he replied carefully. "Chairman Kronos has become increasingly erratic since Nova Centralis. There are rumors that he blames the military leadership for allowing the rebellion to succeed." "And you're worried about your position?" "I'm worried about the galaxy," Thorn said bluntly. "Kronos is preparing something called the Final Solution, a plan to sterilize any world that shows signs of rebellion. Billions of beings, Zara. Entire species wiped out because they refused to submit." The horror of it made Zara's blood run cold. She had known the Empire was capable of atrocities, but systematic genocide on an interstellar scale was beyond even her worst nightmares. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Help me stop it," Thorn said simply. "There are others in the Imperial fleet who feel as I do, officers who join to protect the innocent, not to commit mass murder. We can't overthrow the Empire from within, but we can sabotage the Final Solution if we have rebel support." It was the alliance Zara had never dared hope for, Imperial military commanders working with the rebellion to prevent the worst excesses of their own government. But it also represented a fundamental change in the nature of their conflict. transforming it from a simple rebellion into something approaching a galactic civil war. "What would you need?" she asked. "Coordinates for the weapons factories producing the sterilization devices. Technical specifications for the targeting systems. And most importantly, a way to evacuate the targeted populations before the Empire can implement its plan." Zara studied her former mentor's face, seeing the same moral conflict that had driven her own defection. The Empire demanded absolute loyalty, but some orders were too monstrous to obey. "I'll need to consult with the Democratic Assembly," she said finally. "This isn't a decision I can make alone." "I understand. But Zara, time is running out. Kronos plans to begin the final solution within the next 3 months. If we're going to act, it has to be soon." As Thorn's ship departed, Zara found herself contemplating the strange turns that war could take. She had begun this journey as a loyal Imperial officer following orders. She had become a rebel leader fighting for freedom. Now she might become something she had never expected, a savior of the very empire she had sworn to destroy. The Democratic Assembly debated for 3 days before reaching their decision. By a narrow margin, they voted to support Thorn's plan, recognizing that preventing genocide took precedence over achieving victory in their rebellion. The operation that followed would be remembered as the most complex military coordination in galactic history. Rebel intelligence networks provided targeting data while Imperial officers sabotaged their own weapons systems. Rebel evacuation fleets worked alongside Imperial defectors to move entire populations to safety before the sterilization devices could be deployed. And at the center of it all, former enemies worked together to prevent an atrocity that would have made the Empire's previous crimes seem trivial by comparison. When Chairman Kronos finally gave the order to implement the final solution, he discovered that his superweapons had been turned into elaborate fireworks displays, creating spectacular light shows in empty space while the populations they were meant to kill watched safely from rebel-controlled worlds. The failure of the final solution marked the beginning of the Empire's true collapse. Military units mutinied rather than participate in genocide. Entire sectors declared independence and requested admission to the Democratic Assembly. And on Nova Centralis itself, the Undercity resistance finally succeeded in storming the government district, forcing the surviving council members to flee to the Outer Rim. Zara received word of Kronos' capture 3 weeks later, transmitted by Maria Santos from the newly liberated capital world. The former chairman of the Galactic Council had been found hiding in a forgotten maintenance tunnel, his cybernetic enhancements failing as his augmented body finally succumbed to the stress of defeat. "What happens now?" Admiral Vasquez asked as they reviewed the latest reports from across the galaxy. "Now we do the hard part," Zara replied, looking out at the stars that no longer belong to any empire. "We prove that freedom is more than just the absence of tyranny. We build something worth the sacrifices that brought us here." The Galactic Democratic Union, as it came to be known, would face challenges that made the rebellion seem simple by comparison. Integrating hundreds of different species and cultures into a single political system, rebuilding the infrastructure that war had destroyed, and creating institutions that could govern fairly across interstellar distances, all of it required patience, compromise, and the kind of wisdom that came only from hard experience. But as Zara watched the construction of the first democratically elected galactic parliament, she knew that they had accomplished something unprecedented in the history of intelligent life. They had proven that even the mightiest empire could fall when its subjects refused to remain silent. The last frontier, it turned out, had never been space at all. It had been the frontier between oppression and freedom, between the rule of force and the consent of the governed. And for the first time in galactic history, that frontier had been crossed by those who chose to stand on the side of liberty. The stars themselves bore witness to the birth of a new age, one where the dreams of billions would no longer be sacrificed to feed the ambitions of the few. And in the archives of the Democratic Union, historians would record that it had all begun with a single commander who chose conscience over orders, and principles over power. The rebellion was over. The real work of building a just galaxy had just begun.